like you, and the Tampa Bay Times. The Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper is available around the Tampa Bay area and online at tampabay.com. Thanks to the Tampa Bay Times for their support.
Good morning and welcome to Wave Makers on WMNF with Janet and Tom, a weekly conversation with people making a difference in the Tampa Bay region. I'm Janet.
And I'm Tom.
And answering the phones today is the lovely Irene. If you want to join our conversation, you can call us at 813-239-9663 and Irene will get you through to us. You can also email us at dj@wmnf.org or reach us by text at 813-433-0885. As you know, WMNF would not exist without the support of you, our listeners. We will be asking for your support during our membership drive, October 4th through October 11th. So October 10th will be the day that Wavemakers will be talking to you about fundraising. We have a couple special thank you gifts to offer our listeners, including a vintage Doonesbury poster with an interesting backstory and a 2-volume book of historic Tampa photos. More on those later, but if you are a fan of Wavemakers and WMNF, please consider donating. You do not have to wait until next week.
Today's guest has been making waves for more than 20 years as a Democratic elected official in St. Petersburg. Charlie Justice has served in both the Florida House and Senate, and since 2012 as a Pinellas County Commissioner. Right now, he's dealing with a couple of the biggest issues confronting the Tampa Bay region: the future of the Rays and the future of our beaches, considered some of the best in the world. Welcome to Wavemakers, Charlie.
Good morning. How are you?
We're doing great. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for being here. Charlie's joining us by Zoom today. The Rays want hundreds of millions of dollars in tax subsidies to stay in St. Petersburg, including $300 million from Pinellas County. Meanwhile, private beachfront landowners are blocking badly needed beach renourishment projects in a dispute with the federal government that could result in more local taxes paying for the work. So, Charlie, lots to talk about, but let's start with the Rays.
So, Charlie, what do you think? Do you support this deal that's being proposed right now, or do you have questions about it?
Oh, I think we all still have questions about it. This was, this was a long time to get here. And if you talk to anyone who's dealt with the negotiations from St. Pete, Tampa, Hillsborough, Pinellas over the last, decade, it was getting to this point, of getting a framework of a deal so that we could actually start talking about the deal, because up to this point, it's just been gray numbers. And so I really appreciate the mayor's team, Rob Gertis, our administrator, Mr. Burton, and the team's folks for working for really the last year to get us to this point where we can have that real conversation. We can start digging into some of these more specifics. But I support the framework. We still need to see some of the details on some of the funding, but this is exactly what a big part of this TDT, the Tourist Development Tax funds, are specifically authorized for by Florida statutes.
Well, as you mentioned, it has been years. The Rays have been, frankly, complaining about the location of the stadium for years. They have contended that it depresses attendance. And yet they want to build a new one basically right where they are now. They want to spend $1.3 billion on a ballpark in downtown St. Pete. And, they want St. Pete and Pinellas taxpayers to pay at least $600 million of that. But the total cost of the tax subsidy is a little unclear, right, Charlie?
Well, if you break it into different parts, if you're just talking about the stadium and not the overall development, then they're obviously two different things. The stadium is estimated to be 1.2, 1.3, with the county and city kicking in 6, and the team taking the rest, and including overruns, which is important. And so from the county's perspective, it is not general funds. It's not property taxes. It's not funds that we could use to pay our deputies or do some things like that. It is specifically tourist development taxes, which has very strict limitations in Florida statute on what we can do with that, including advertising our destination, contributing to some capital projects like we've done with the Salvador Dali Museum, the Clearwater Aquarium, Ruth Eckerd Hall, the Florida Arts and Crafts Museum downtown, things like that. as well as beach nourishment.
Well, are the rays a tourist attraction? I mean, is that would we consider that a tourist attraction?
I see it, yes, absolutely. Having the rays here is part of that package of amenities for our tourists. It is a draw. It is part of the package of when people travel. Absolutely. I also see it as, locals, we deal with, 15 million visitors, I think 5 million overnight guests last year. Being able to have tourists pay for some of these quality of life amenities, I think is a nice thing for us to be able to do with the tourist tax. Also the tourists pay.
Go ahead.
I was just saying the tourists pay 1/3 of our penny for Pinellas, which pays for infrastructure like roads and sewer and parks, community centers, and things like that.
Now, we've talked about, $600 million roughly total subsidy from the taxpayers, half of that coming from the county, half or more coming from St. Pete. I say or more because St. Petersburg City Council member Richie Floyd says it's actually much bigger than that. And Floyd was on WMNF's The Skinny on Friday and raised a point about the sale of publicly owned land that hasn't gotten much attention. Let's listen to a brief excerpt of that interview.
There was a press conference Tuesday you mentioned, and I did not attend because I have some serious concerns about it. I know everyone's celebratory that the Rays want to stay, and it's great that they want to stay, and I look forward to them staying. But I think right now what's most important is that the public knows what the actual cost of them staying is and the cost of this redevelopment is. You mentioned some of the details before, $130 million for infrastructure, $300 million, and I'm just talking about from the city, in city funds, and what some of this money really could go to, and that's not the end of it. I mean, we're selling publicly owned land for much under its appraised value. The total subsidy just between the land, the public dollars for the stadium and the public dollars for infrastructure gets into the $800 million point. It's a significant amount of money, and I think the public really needs to be aware of it before we can go on and have this conversation. And so that's why I am hesitant to jump right on board. And that's just the cost of the cash. I mean, if you count in the debt service, we're looking at well over $1 billion worth of money to go to something that is nice. And yes, it's great for us all to have. But is it really the most effective thing for us to do with our city money right now when child poverty in the city is growing, when income inequality in the city is growing, when we have issues with homelessness and food access? I question some of the wisdom. And so that's why I've avoided the situation, or I didn't go to the press conference the other day.
That's St. Petersburg City Council member Richie Floyd speaking with Mitch Perry on WMNF's The Skinny about the cost to taxpayers of a new Rays stadium. You can hear the full interview on our website, WMNF.org. So, Charlie, does he have a point? Should the Rays be paying full value for the land?
Well, I think that's exactly what I was talking about is, all the negotiations, all the conversations got us to the point where we could have this conversation. Everyone can start looking at the numbers. They can start having input. I don't know if the council members' numbers are accurate. That's what this time frame moving forward is all about, is looking at all the numbers. How does that relate with the development rights that the city gave to the Rays 20 years ago? Because the Rays had a big portion of development rights. How does that factor into the contribution of affordable housing units on that site? All of those, this is not a straight up, he gets $300 million, the stadium is built. It's a lot of moving parts. And that's what, again, getting us to this point. There's a lot of all of this back and forth over the last decade, and more seriously in the last couple of years since Mayor Welch took office, to get us to this point today where we have a sheet of paper to look at. And then at the end of the day, does it make sense in the entire project? Again, the city has a lot bigger piece of this with the entire 86 acres, the massive $6.8 billion development of the 80 acres. The county's portion is really more focused on the stadium and the Rays, and how does that part all fit in with everything? And
the county actually would, as it does now, would own the new ballpark, right?
Yeah, there's apparently I don't know if you call it a quirk or what, in Florida law, that if the county owns the site, it avoids the property taxes for the stadium itself. If it was obviously owned by the team, it would incur heavy property taxes, which then changes the deal completely. And so the county money, as you mentioned, would only come from tourist development, the bed taxes, they call it, that hotels pay.
And there's sufficient money to pay that debt service over 30 years?
Absolutely. I think a few months ago, a lot of us were concerned about what would it take for the beach nourishment. There was a lot of angst about that. Our folks have shown us a chart that shows us that we're in pretty good shape as far as being able to handle beach nourishment as well as the raise and potentially some other smaller projects along the way as we move forward. The bed tax is been growing steadily over the last several years. And, I think it was $30 million 10 years ago. It's closer to $100 million today. And again, we use a portion of that, a big portion for marketing our destination, for operating our convention and visitor bureau, for paying for staff for that. And then a lot of it goes into, again, beach nourishment. We set aside a portion every year, which we haven't spent in several years. We have a healthy reserve for beach nourishment, and also into capital reserves in order to be able to pay for projects without bonding as best possible. Obviously, a raised stadium would require a bond issue, but we've been able to pay for contributing to Clearwater, Dunedin, and St. Petersburg projects without having to bond because we've been able to build up reserve over years, as you traditionally do with a capital program.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Wave Makers on WMNF, and our guest today is Pinellas County Commissioner Charlie Justice. We're talking right now about the Rays' new development and stadium in Pinellas County, St. Petersburg, and taxpayer money going to support that. We want to hear from you, 813-239-9663, or you can email us at dj@wmnf.org. What do you think? Do you want to see tourist development tax dollars spent on a new Rays stadium in St. Petersburg? Is that something you support? Do you love the Rays? Do you go to Rays games? Would you rather go to a Rays game in a new stadium? You can give us a call. We want to hear from you. And you can also pose a question directly to Pinellas County Commissioner Charlie Justice.
So, Charlie, you mentioned it's pretty clear you're not going to spend money outside of the tourist development tax dollars, the county commission, and you would support that, correct?
Yeah, I don't think you have any votes on the county commission for general property tax dollars or anything like that. That's the message we have sent to our administrator from day one. We haven't really had a full conversation at the county commission between us about specifics. That's what will be coming in the coming weeks and months as we really delve into the details of this entire deal.
And, you represent Pinellas County, not the city of St. Petersburg, but we have a lot of St. Petersburg taxpayers listening. Where would the money come from St. Petersburg's portion of this deal, which is about half of the public subsidy, perhaps more?
Well, that's what we look forward to seeing. As I think you had a council member on there, they'll have an opportunity to dig into that and see. I know what you know, that the mayor has committed that it would not come from property taxes or increased taxes, that it would come from bonding different flows of income. And I have not seen the details on that part of the portion yet. So we'll have a chance to look at that together.
Sometimes local governments will use a community redevelopment district where the extra property tax revenue that's generated by new development is not shared with the rest of the city, but it goes right back into the area that where it's built. Is that the same kind of idea that St. Peter's looking at?
The mayor said no property taxes, so that would be property taxes in my mind. But the county and the city of St. Pete have partnered over the last 30 years on different CRAs and tax increment financing districts, including one where the Tropicana Field sits now, one in South St. Petersburg, and one along the waterfront in downtown St. Petersburg. Those of us who've lived here forever, those of that are maybe new in the last 10 or 20 years, don't remember when Beach Drive was not as beautiful as it is now, but Beach Drive was a CRA TIF district, and money was spent to improve the infrastructure there and serve as setting the table for all the incredible private investment that's happened downtown. And so the city and county have committed money for Tropicana site out of the CRA TIF, but that is for infrastructure, returning a street plan, putting streets in where the parking lot is, some underground stuff, things like that. But my understanding is not for the actual stadium construction.
Now, you mentioned Beach Drive, and obviously downtown St. Pete is just exploding, and it has been for the last, say, decade. Would you say that was the result of the raise or in spite of the raise?
I don't think it's either. I think it's a combination. Was downtown St. Pete taking off? Absolutely. I think people discovered it Are the Rays a portion of that? I think absolutely. Are they the sole reason? No, of course not. We have incredible restaurants. I think about Robert Sanderson, who owned one of the first really nice restaurants downtown St. Pete. He invested early on Central Avenue, and then he saw the future, and he moved his site from Central, and I think he was about 5th or 6th Street, and he moved down to Beach Drive, and it took off down there. So, no, I think there are a lot of private investors, Bob Cerruti and some of those folks that really invested downtown. But you can't ignore, thousands of folks that come to a ball game and come for dinner before or stay after, things like that. I think it's all worked together. I think it's all part of the big puzzle.
And now it seems the Rays, after spending years denigrating that location, have embraced it because of the development that's going on. And they see that there's money to be made through the development rights that they already own through the current lease, right? So is
exactly.
that...
I think,
yeah.
Yeah, I think, and you say denigrate, obviously, I think the reality is that the population center is not in Pinellas, if you look at the entire 4 or 5 county region. So you have some, you have some opportunities and challenges when it comes to attendance and things. And I think, the thought for a long time was that if you put it over in middle of Hillsborough, that you would have a better chance at raising your attendance. That factors into the big costs. And looking at it over the last decade, looking at the growth of St. Pete and Pinellas, looking at the change of residents, the Rays decided that they were willing to make that investment. And I don't think they make a $700, $800, $900 million investment lightly. But yeah, I think St. Pete's changed, Pinellas changed, Tampa Bay has changed. And hopefully the next piece of the puzzle, being able to improve our infrastructure as far as transportation and transit, and that will help all of that work together.
We have an email from Charles Parker, who asks, and I don't know the answer to this question, maybe you do, Commissioner, does Pinellas County charge Airbnb type rentals tourist taxes? And are their properties assessed as if commercial, like a hotel? I'm sure they're not assessed as commercial, but I don't know.
They're not. That's a good question. I don't believe they're assessed as commercial, but they do. The tax collector does collect taxes from Airbnbs.
That's presumably hotel taxes, just like the hotels do. I don't. But
right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's state law that dictates that. So if you have a question for us, and for the Commissioner Justice, like Charles Parker did, you can email us at wmnf.org, or you can call us at 813-239-9663. And we're talking right now about the redevelopment of the Rays site in St. Petersburg.
Well, one question that I have that I think probably a lot of listeners have is more fundamental. We have been talking about the Rays. Should they be in St. Pete? Should they be in Tampa? Should they split their season with Montreal? There's always cities.
Remember that crazy idea?
Yeah, remember that crazy idea? There are always cities that would like to take a Major League Baseball team from another city. But so, did the Rays use Tampa to get a better deal in St. Pete?
No, I don't. I mean, you have to ask every person on these two boards will have a chance to vote. I've never looked at it that way. I've looked at from the beginning that there would be an opportunity and there would be a potential deal, and the city and the county would come together. But no, to think that if Tampa said, well, we'll do 610, then it would come back to us and we'll do 615. No, that's never been part of my thought.
Or if they had just been honest and said, we can't afford to pave the streets, so we can't build a new baseball stadium for the Rays. But a more fundamental question. Go ahead, Charlie.
No, the reality is that Hillsborough has a lot of things already on its plate with, potential renovations for Raymond James. Amalie Arena is always out there. The Yankee Stadium is there. They've had a commitment over the years to the aquarium, to the Straz, to the convention center.
The Lightning.
So
the Tampa Museum.
Yeah. So the reality was that it would be a struggle for them under their bed tax. And so I never saw any, Mayor Kreisman, to his credit, open the door for Hillsborough and Tampa to make an offer. And what came back was not something that was, a real thought out, serious plan, if you look back at it. So it was going to take something incredibly creative. I think there was still potential for that with different avenues. But the reality is, from day one, the financing has always been easier in Pinellas County because of our bed tax.
And you mentioned that you can spend that money on other things. So I think a more fundamental question a lot of people have is, Why should tax dollars be used to subsidize wealthy team owners?
No, I think if you don't think $1 should go, I think that's a reasonable point of view. I think that, again, if we were talking about general funds, this would be a completely different conversation. These are strictly limited by Florida statute on what we can spend them for. And our Tourist Development Council years ago, before it became popular statewide, years ago, we put in a strict 60-40 limitation. So 60% would always be set aside for marketing the destination and operating our CVB, and never going above 40% for capital projects, so that we would never get turned upside down to where we were funding all these capital projects and not have money to market our destination, which this is what the original tax was designed for, was to market the destination. The hoteliers came together, put this tax on themselves basically to say, we want a fund to market our destination. And that's what we've used it for. And over the years, that use has been expanded. And again, we've made investments, some while I've been on the commission, some before I got here, in the Salvador Dali, the Clearwater Aquarium, the Dunedin Blue Jays, Ruth Eckerd Hall, Clearwater softball complexes that helps with those ESPN tournaments, that NCAA tournaments that come, the original renovation to the Florida Suncoast Dome. So these are funds that we've used for this before. It helps with tourist amenities, which is part of what they're, and also, again, like I said at the beginning, it's part of the overall quality of life that our residents get to enjoy as well.
Do some of those groups also have their hand out now, or is there a competition between the Rays and, say, Mahaffey Theater, the Dali Museum, other arts groups? And the arts, a lot of people have pointed to the arts as one of the main reasons that St. Pete has come alive the way it has. Is there money to be had shared with them as well, and still have the advertising and support the Rays?
Yeah, I think, if we're smart about it, I think there is. The county commission voted just recently to fund the Salvador Dali Museum expansion. I think the final number that was agreed to was about $25 million out of I think it was a $70 million, $65 million total project. The county contributes $25 million of bed tax for that. That helps with, again, the Dali is a world-renowned tourist attraction. The county contributed towards the Arts and Crafts Museum downtown St. Petersburg. The county has contributed to the Florida Holocaust Museum for their renovation. The St. Pete History Museum at the Pier is one that we're still currently negotiating with. They have a request in. The Clearwater or Philadelphia Phillies and City of Clearwater are preparing and asked for renovations to Baycare Field and on US 19. But yes, I think that, folks who work in these areas, folks that are part of these facilities or these organizations, are aware of the availability of these funds and certainly don't hesitate to ask for a contribution.
We're talking to Pinellas County Commissioner Charlie Justice about the Rays development in St. Pete right now. We've got a couple comments from our listeners. We have one person who sent us an email, says, waste of money, ! Put a big picture of Stuart Sternberg on the dome and put the funds into infrastructure. And we also have a caller on the line, Sarah in Tampa. You are on the line. What's on your mind?
I'm very disappointed that there's no discussion at all on low and middle income people and the housing portion of this. Historically, this was to reestablish a neighborhood that was decimated by prejudicial housing practices. I know he's here to talk about the Rays, but I'm begging him to spend some time talking about the housing, the neighborhood. I did look at all these plans. They look like, tourist destinations. I'm not seeing a basketball court for a pickup game. So could you please either talk about this now, or could you have another guest on a later program?
We can talk about this now.
So, Commissioner, tell us about the Rays plans, and is affordable housing part of that? And also, if you want to talk a little bit about what the commission is doing about affordable housing in Pinellas County.
Sure. Again, this is more on the city side of the ledger, but as part of that whole development, I think there's 1,200 units of affordable housing on site. And I think they were talking about another 600 off-site that they were going to work towards. That's part of the mayor's. I really credit Ken for his drawing a line on this. When you're talking about affordable housing, it is a 20 or 30-year subsidy as far as how you construct that unit. What used to be a $50,000 per unit is now closer to $250,000 per unit cost to build an apartment unit. And to make that financially work, you have to build so many market rate. So if you build so many market rate, you can make profit there, and you can put that back into construction the affordable rate. So I think the mayor has been very strong on making sure that affordable housing was part of on-site as well as off-site development from this entire Ray's-Hines deal. If you know Ken at all, this site is incredibly important to him and his family. He grew up on this site. I know that preserving that the promises that were made from the original Florida Suncoast Dome, ensuring that those promises are kept and come to fruition now with this deal is important to the mayor. We'll all have the opportunity at the final thing to go through with the units to make sure that the numbers match up for everybody's satisfaction. I put a lot of faith in Ken and his evaluation of where we've come to as far as treating this site with respect. But there is a significant amount of affordable housing, workforce housing that will be on-site as well as some off-site. And then the second part was that the county committed, when the voters passed the Penny for Pinellas in 2017, the county committed a portion of that for our land assembly fund for affordable housing units and workforce housing units in Pinellas County. And I don't have the number in front of me, but we have been working on developments all over the county, Palms of Pinellas and Largo, the Fairfield Apartments on 34th Street, the Skyway Lofts in South St. Petersburg, and as well as working with, and we've got a couple of developments coming in the Lellman area and several sites that we partnered with Habitat for Humanity for 80%, those are making 80% of the area median income as far as getting in permanent housing beyond the apartment. We're working as well as to achieve that home ownership goal for so many folks too.
You're listening to Wavemakers on WMNF with Janet and Tom, and our guest today is Pinellas County Commissioner Charlie Justice. We've been talking about Rays baseball, and in a minute we'll come back and we're going to talk about beach renourishment. But first, this.
Jazz is alive at WMNF. Tune in Sunday evenings at 8 for Colors of Jazz at our new time, featuring new releases from new artists, old favorites, international jazz from Europe, Asia, and Canada, covering everything from big band swing to bop to fusion. We play it all, plus specials celebrating the music of giants like Ellington, Miles Davis, Pat Metheny, Quincy Jones, Chick Corea, even Frank Zappa. We play the music you'll hear no place else on the radio. Check out our interviews with local jazz musicians. Jazz is what America sounds like, and it's yours to listen to come Sunday evening. If you can't catch us live, play it back from the archives.
And also catch Jazz in the Night with Bob Seymour on Mondays from 9 to midnight. Now, Charlie, we're going to shift a little bit. It may seem dramatic, but it's not really shifting from the Rays to the beaches.
No, because you've mentioned several times, actually, that those tourist development tax dollars can go for the Rays or they can go for the beaches.
And the beaches are very eroded right now. These beaches that we all love so much. Jan and I travel all over the place. We go to beaches, and we always say the beaches are better at home. But we're not going to have beaches much longer if something's not done, right? So what is going on? Beach renourishment has been going on in Pinellas County for probably more than 50 years. I think the first one that was done with the help of the federal government was on Sunset Beach in Treasure Island, which was recently decimated by the hurricane. And I know there's work going on right now to restore just that stretch of the beaches. What is the hang-up with renourishing the rest of the Pinellas beaches?
Well, there's two parts. We have emergency crews out there right now on Sunset trucking in sand as we speak. And if you go on the county website, you can, or Facebook, social media, you can see pictures of the trucks there. So there's emergency response for when we have a storm like this. But we have been working with a long-term plan for Sand Key and Long Key, which more people know as Upham Beach, St. Pete Beach, for several years now. And it's really part of the hang-up is a change interpretation by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And for that 60 years that you've been talking about that we've been doing this in Pinellas County, there's been a partnership between the county, the state, and the federal government through the U.S. Army Corps. And in the past, the Army Corps, and many of us remember Congressman Young, who helped fund a lot of our beach-specific projects.
He was a big advocate for beach renourishment, federally funded, yes.
And then we had, for many years in the state Senate, we had Dennis Jones, who a lot of us called Dr. Beach, because he made sure that the state match was always there. And then the county would be 20%. So it was for us, it was a great formula. It worked well over the years. This last project on Sand Key, the Army Corps said they want every resident to sign a perpetual easement for access. And that has never been the interpretation of the Corps in any of our previous projects. So that we've been out there, our utility workers and folks have been out knocking on doors and talking to folks, asking for folks to sign these easements. And we have not been able to get folks to do that. I think we're at like 52% of the affected property owners. And the Army Corps has really taken a hard line on this and said, until we have compliance, we're not going to fund this program.
And what is the objection of the property owners? Don't they realize they're getting free sand?
Well, there's been two parts. One, there's been some change in state law over the years about public access, the definition of private beach, all those kind of things. But they feel like if they sign away this easement, that it means that folks are going to be able to come up in their backyard, which is really not the case. And there's been disinformation out there that the Army Corps, the federal government, or the county government was going to suddenly come take control of their beach. And so, once you get those seeds of doubt out there, it's very hard to get folks to completely buy in. And so we're trying to take it from all the avenues. We're still working with the residents, but the hope of getting 100% residents it seems not really something that's realistic right now. We are continuing to work with our members of Congress, our U.S. senators, and the Army Corps as far as understanding, the change of policy, maybe the definition of access and easements, explaining to folks that the easement is not signed to the federal government, it's signed to the county, and what assurances can the county give property owners that we're not going to come on there, making them understand that if we could put sand in there and we widen the beach, that's more beach for people to be further away from the property line on the backside of their property. And also, like you talked about, that sand there, not only is it an amenity to enjoy, but it also helps protect your property when we do have storms. And so, I'm not sure exactly how all these seeds of doubt took place, but it's problematic and it's troublesome, and it's certainly causing us a lot of concerns as far as how we fund beach nourishment.
Well, since the 1968 Florida Constitution, it's been very clear, it's in the Constitution, that the beaches belong to the public. So why is it that some people are insisting that their stretch of beach behind their house is private? And I've seen videos where they're trying to tell people to get off the beach because that's their beach. How can they do that?
Well, I don't think they should. I think, like you said, someone said this years ago to me, and I kind of, beach access is a birthright of Floridians. I grew up here, never thought about not having easy access to our beaches here. And so the legislature changed the law a few years ago, and it was caused a little confusion. It caused folks to think that they had more access to beach and others. Again, this is a small percentage of the situation as far as people coming up or getting too close to people's property. People want to go out, they want to enjoy the water, they want to enjoy the sand, and that has been the way my entire life. But some confusion by the legislature a few years ago as far as where that line is. That water line has always been public. That remains public today. It gets into, and again, I think I told you the other day that I would need to get my beach attorney with me if we're going to start getting into like coastal erosion line language and that kind of thing. But
that line just is so difficult to discern.
It's generally what the high water mark is considered public, and then beyond that is considered.
I've seen old
private
maps of this line. It was set, I think it was set back in like '68 or something, right? And it goes through caddies. If people are familiar with caddies on the beach, on Sunset Beach, it literally goes through their building. And yet caddies has insisted that the sand between their building and the Gulf belongs to them and will chase people off of there who bring, their own beer to quote, caddies beach. So the whole thing is kind of confusing these days.
It is, and again, we're just we're trying to have folks see the benefit. The more sand we can put in, the wider the beach is. Again, the more space for people to be at. It really helps with that destination. When you look at the pictures, you want to see the beautiful beaches, and really it helps with the stability of our shoreline. Having that beach there, having those dunes there, helps with wave action. It helps with storm protection, all those things. So this is really important, and we continue to work with the Army Corps to see if we can't get them to, have some flexibility in the language so that we can get this job done, that we're not putting it off any further than we need to.
Well, the Army Corps may have a new approach now, but they have always insisted that those beach communities provide public access to the point of having a certain number of parking places within walking distance, having beach access. That hasn't changed, has it?
No, this is still part of that overall thing. If you're going to receive the sand, there's public access. This is the stumbling block this year, these last several years, has been the signing of the access and the easements. And so just as folks have utility easements, most of us in their backyard for Duke Energy to come and access the pole, this would be access for equipment to put sand down. This is not something means that people could come at 10 p.m. at night and set up tents or something. This is access to do the work of renourishing the beaches. This is not anything else. And if we could get people to understand that, we could be further along on getting those getting closer to compliance. But again, 100% compliance, which is what the Army Corps says right now, I just don't see that as being realistic.
But I think there's a similarity with the discussion with the Rays, because there is a philosophical question here, or a more fundamental, maybe even scientific question. In the case of the Rays, you haven't done this, and I credit you for this. You have not really talked about much justifying the tax for the Rays with economic development. There's hardly any economists who believe that you get much bang for the buck in investing in sports complexes. Meanwhile, you have scientists who study the beaches, and they say, this beach is just going to wash away again. So you're spending millions of dollars to renourish a beach. You just walk away from it and let nature take its course. And now you're talking about asking Pinellas taxpayers to bear the majority of the cost. Is that right?
Well, again, it would be from tourist tax dollars. It would be from taxes that tourists pay.
Yeah.
So this is, replenishing the amenities that tourists pay to come see. And so, and we'll go back to the stadium, and there is economic benefit to the stadium. Is there return 100% ROI? You can find economists who will obviously tell you, give you the answer on that. But it is a community amenity to have that stadium, to have the facility for other events, to have a team here, to have the national exposure. All those things have benefit. It's not a zero benefit. The beaches benefit us for all those hotels and restaurants that benefit from having I said 15 million visitors last year, 5 million overnight, and the great majority of them were staying on a beach from Clearwater down to St. Pete Beach. We have 100,000 families in Pinellas County whose job relies on tourism. And so that is part of our economic engine here. It is not our only economic engine, but if you're talking about 100,000 folks that rely on tourism for how they make their living, that is a pretty big deal for the people of Pinellas County.
Well, and it's not just the people in Pinellas County and the folks staying in hotels. I mean, Janet and I love going to the beaches, and Upland Beach has become one of our favorites. I'm glad you're going to be renourishing that at some point.
Don't tell people Upland Beach. We like it as quiet as we can get it.
Right. It's quiet. It's nice. And there's really good restaurants within walking distance but let's not talk about that.
And we've watched the Paso Grill Beach actually just shrink over the years, which used to be our favorite beach, but it's less so now.
But we do like to talk about solutions. So is there a solution to this problem? Charlie, do you see something? Is there going to be a logjam broken here by you and some other commissioners, or what's going to happen now in the next months or years?
Well, we're doing the things that we would do normally. So even if the Army Corps said all good, you still have to go through design, engineering, architecture. And I know that sounds like a lot of stuff when you're just putting sand up, but there is a process to this thing. And so we're doing all of that work now as we continue to work with the Army Corps about language to have a better understanding and hopefully break that logjam. there's 11 counties in Florida that are under similar circumstances that we are. We're working with them to work with our U.S. senators to explain how important this is to our friends in Washington. But then we're also making plans that, worst case scenario, if we have to go it alone and fund it. And we're working on those projections, which our staff feels comfortable that we would be able to do that. We're going to go through all those numbers in the coming months as we kind of balance out the stadium and other requests from museums, as well as what do we really need to commit to beach nourishment? Because, like I said, I was born and raised here. That beach is critical. That's why people come here. That's why we love living here. And that beach is number one priority.
Let's go to the phones. We've got Nancy in St. Pete on the line. She wants to talk about beach erosion. Nancy, what's up?
Hi, yeah. Been looking at this pretty hard. I grew up in Indian Rocks Beach, and, we had our share of the comings and goings of the sand and everything for years, since we moved there in 1954. And so anyway, I just wanted to, one thing you did not mention is the amount the Army Corps was going to pay of this project. 65%. People are nuts not to take them up on that. And also the what they're afraid of, and this is something nationwide. They have this problem in California. They have this in New York. They have this on all the coasts, which is the people who buy their homes there are so just delighted that they can be oceanfront, waterfront, that they feel entitled. Mm-hmm. They feel entitled to the entire beach. And all those other people who don't belong there, and those are people who can't afford to be there, then the hell with them, So this is the problem. And to go to your senators to try to get them to, have the federal government lay off on their things is a travesty. Because the reason that you're not saying is with the Army Corps' new stuff is they are part of Homeland Security. This is a Homeland Security thing. Do you understand?
I'm not sure I understand that connection, Nancy.
That there is a connection. That's why they're asking for 100%, because Homeland Security has to get in there in case there is flooding, and so maybe it's somebody's house. Well, what are they going to do? They have no way of getting out, possibly. So so the Homeland Security will come or not come. FEMA will not come. If there's no beach front. I mean, if everything's flooded, no one's going to come to your rescue. And so they want that access between the houses. I think it's giving up a little to gain a lot. If we can get that 65% of the Army Corps, input into this, that it means everything. It means our whole area. No one's going to want to come here just to see the Rays play or the Bucks play or stuff like that. They want to go to the beach and all that means to everybody.
Yeah.
And in order to keep doing that, you've got to have a beach.
I always say how lucky we are to be here. People come from all over the world to go to our beaches.
Yeah, exactly. And when we said that it was the number one beach in the United States, everybody came, and you couldn't even get across a bridge to get there. And, unless you left real early in the morning. But, I do miss the beach, but I sure was lucky to grow up out there, I'll tell you. And I wish more kids could do that. That's all I want to say.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you for the call, Nancy.
Yeah.
Appreciate it very much. We got a couple other emails that are going back to our Rays conversation. So let's look at those real quick. We've got Donald who says, it's all well and good for the Rays, but let's face it, both St. Pete and Tampa are rapidly facing gentrification. To say that these upgrades are going to generate funds to create affordable housing is laughable. This person does not believe that is happening. We also have an email about from Mr. Slepp, who's wants to know about all the Australian pines that were cut in Fort DeSoto. Commissioner, do you know anything about that, about Australian pines being cut at Fort DeSoto?
We had several years ago, you might be referring to, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago, where we did a massive removal of invasive species and have been replanting native Florida species of pines. And so if you go out there, you'll see the new development of natural trees. We have those invasive species all over Pinellas, and we've worked as best we can where possible to remove those, so that because some of those are not good for. They have shallow root systems. They uproot very easily in storms. That's probably what he's referring to.
And the pine needles are very acidic, and when they fall to the ground, it does not create a very good environment for things to grow there, which also affects animals and things like that. So the Australian pines are beautiful, but they are not native.
Yeah, and I assume that's what he's talking. That's several years ago that, and it was stark because they removed a lot. We had I believe it was a state grant at the time that kind of forced the timing of it and doing it in a big swath as opposed to more systematically. But I assume that's what he's talking about.
I seem to recall they also lined Paso Grill along the beaches, and they all froze one year, and they were gone. They're beautiful, but they're not native.
We also have another email, Commissioner, from someone who's asking a question not about either the rays or beach renourishment, but this is a retired air rescue firefighter from the St. Pete Clearwater Airport, and he wants to know what the county is doing about the decades of testing of aqueous film-forming foam, and I believe that is firefighting, a chemical that's used for firefighting, and there's a lot of airports do a lot of testing with that foam. And he says all the product is seeping into the ground, only a stone's throw away from Old Tampa Bay. It is a forever chemical. I'm not sure if are you familiar with that at all, Commissioner?
I don't have any real great detailed answer. Yes, I think that the awareness of the chemicals on the firefighting tools over the years have evolved, and people are getting smarter, and we have a firefighter crew out there, so they would fall under those normal evaluations. I don't have a really good up-to-date answer for you today.
Yeah, I vaguely seem to recall from my days of working at the airport that there's some sort of a disconnect between, there's some maybe federal requirements on actually even using these chemicals that are not either. I don't think they're good for the environment, and they're not good for people either.
Right.
Well, we only have a few more minutes to go in our show, and I did want to bring up the fact that you've been in this political world and government for a long time now. A lot of folks may not remember. You served in the House and you served in the Senate.
20 years. It's been 20 years of community service.
You also worked at USF St. Pete, and talk about an institution in St. Pete that has an economic impact. How do you think things are going at USF St. Pete these days with the consolidation with Tampa?
Well, the campus is thriving. I think, and you only have a couple minutes. I opposed the consolidation, quite frankly. I wanted that autonomy for USF St. Petersburg. That being said, making the marine science program part of the official St. Pete institution is huge. That campus will thrive. It's an incredible location. It's got incredible folks still that I'm still friends with a lot of them that work there and care about the students. The opportunity for residential facilities there. I was a student there a few years back, and it was a ghost town during the day, and at night when people like me who worked all day and went to school at night, it was packed, and it's now become, there's 3 residential facilities, so students can go to school and enjoy downtown St. Petersburg and all that's there. It's night and day from when I was a student there, and it's an incredible asset to downtown.
Let's go to our phones. We've got a caller, Bert, on the line. He has a comment that he'd like to make. Bert, you're on the line. What's up?
Hey, I just want to comment that I just sent the email. You read it. I appreciate that. And that the county needs to look into the problem over there at the airport.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're the retired firefighter about the foam.
I am, and I'm hobbling around here. But it's incredible that you guys do what you do. And I want to just, Mr. Justice, I'm proud of working for Pinellas County. Sorry if I sound a little teary, because I am. But you need to look up AFFF, study the effects, because they poured that on the ground right between the firehouse and the new expansion, a beautiful airport. But The county needs to take responsibility for that.
Okay,
All
thanks
right.
for calling. That's a really good issue.
Thanks
you
for
brought
calling,
up.
Bert. We
Yeah.
brought it.
Thanks.
All right, peace, and I love you
Okay,
guys.
peace.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bert. Appreciate it. I did want to talk to you a little bit before we go here about the difference between today in the Florida legislature and the way they were back when you were there. I know you're not in the legislature, but you know people who were there and you observe it. What's changed?
Well, I think the partisanship and the division that you see in Washington from back in the 90s flowed downhill to Tallahassee. And, you know, when I was there, we could see the beginning of the end as far as when parties really work together to get things done. I mentioned Dennis Jones. I served with Dennis Jones, Don Sullivan, Jim King, Paula Dockery, Republicans, Democrats. And did we agree? No, but it wasn't a demonization of someone who had different views than you that occurs today. And so, yeah, I think that, you know, there was a lot more civility. And unfortunately, I see folks who like that embrace that. They want the chaos. They want the fight. And you see that in folks who are running for local office. Whereas we believe that competence is important. We believe that civility is important. Respecting one another is important. One of the things I've really enjoyed about being on the county commission locally is that we have 7 of us, Democrats, Republicans. We don't always agree, but we treat each other with civility and respect and try and move things forward for the people of Pinellas. So, yeah, the Tallahassee, I used to have friends up there that would try and get me to run again. Please come back. And now they tell me, please don't run. You're better off staying out of Tallahassee.
When you were in Tallahassee, you were there when Jeb Bush was governor and Charlie Crist, I believe. Is that correct?
When I was in the House, Jeb Bush was governor, and I had great conversations with him on policy and movies and a whole bunch of other things over the years. And then, of course, Charlie Crist was our hometown guy. When he was governor, I was in the Senate and got to work with him on issues while we were up there together. Yeah.
So when did things start to change?
Well, I think, you know, in 2000 was when I was a freshman and term limits took in, and there were 63 freshmen in the House, 63 of us coming in, you know, without any that experience as far as being there. And so as some of the folks that had been there for a while phased out, and the legislators got younger and didn't have the institutional memory. And, you know, in the old days, committee chairmen actually were policy experts and ran their committees. Now it seems very top down. The House leadership decides what's going to go into a committee, what's going to pass out of a committee. And then of course you've got the, you know, gerrymandering and political money, all those kind of things that all factor in. It's not just one piece, but you know, that part of it is disappointing.
It's a top-down system now, right? It's
absolutely.
It's
the people who are leading the committees are really just foot soldiers more than anything.
Well, I know that when I was in the Senate, President Pruitt was my Senate president, and we talked all the time. We worked on stuff together. You know, in the House, you have 120, so it's a different dynamic. But you know, there's days where you felt like you could jump on your desk and scream and not get noticed at all in the House as a Democrat. So,
well, back in the day, you used to have a saying: "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." So I guess these days it's "If it ain't broke, let's break it." I don't know.
Well, it's a big budget, a lot of responsibilities. We still, you know, talk with our local legislators, and we have some good ones locally that go up and work hard, and we, you know, encourage them to keep fighting the fight. Before we go, I want to address this one text message that we got from somebody asking about the high water line, thinking that it means you can only use the beach at low tide. What the high water line meant was the high water line would mark where the public beach was, so that the above the high water line would be where somebody could theoretically say that it was private. And
the law passed under Rick Scott has kind of confused the situation, yes, not clarified it.
Thank you for being with us, Commissioner. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for listening. It's been a great conversation. If you love WMNF, don't forget to contribute to Waymakers through the station. We're going to start doing our fund drive coming up on October 4th. Coming up next is Alternative Radio, followed by Harrison Nash. This is WMNF Tampa.
Live from NPR News